Financial leadership is changing. CFOs no longer record history. They make history. This podcast will help you become a better leader, strategic thinker, and digital visionary. Welcome to Secrets of Rockstar CFOs, the ultimate podcast for chief financial officers. Follow along as Jack McCullough engages in exciting chat with accomplished CFOs, learning how they overcame obstacles and positioned their companies for the future. Here's your host, Jack McCullough.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Secrets of Rockstar CFOs. I'm your host, Jack McCullough. You can follow us online at rockstarcfos.com. We have a great guest today, and we're going to jump right into it. Eric Muhlheim is the CFO of Mozilla, definitely one of the most intriguing companies I've come across. Eric, welcome to the Secrets of Rockstar CFOs.
Hey, Jack, it's great to be here, and happy Groundhog Day to you.
Oh boy, I forgot about that. Yes, happy Groundhog Day. So it's kind of a crime that this is an audio experience for most people, because you have definitely the coolest background I've come across in quite some time. So it's a shame people can't see it.
I have to thank our marketing department for that.
Cool. Well, anyway, I actually know Mozilla fairly well from having interviewed Roxy before. Actually, she spoke at one of our conferences, and an interesting company with a great mission. But would you like to share the 10,000-foot view?
Yeah, I'd love to. So at the Mozilla Corporation, we are obviously the company that makes the Firefox web browser. We are in our 25th year right now as a company. And really, the interesting thing about Mozilla is that we are, in fact, a subsidiary of the Mozilla Foundation, which is a 501c3 nonprofit that is really devoted to promoting open and free internet that puts puts people before profit.
You say that's not that rare.
Yeah, exactly. No, we put people before profit. We were founded out of the ashes, shall we say, of the Netscape Navigator 25 years ago. And the goal of the company at that point was to ensure that the protocols that people used to surf the web would be open source and be available to everybody, rather than being something that would be controlled by a single company or an oligopoly that would be setting those standards. And that's something that we still aim ourselves at today.
Yeah, Netscape is a fascinating company. I'd argue it's perhaps the most important company within our lifetime that young people haven't heard of. I mean, just such a game-changing company, and you're living on through Mozilla. So.
No, that's right. It was a game changer back when it started. I mean, I was there, you were there. We sort of saw how that changed everything.
Yeah.
And the important thing about Mozilla is that we made sure that that ended up staying in the hands of the people. There were some companies that wanted to make all the protocols things that they controlled. And the fact that we exist, and the fact that we're backed by a foundation that is not really motivated to have the incentives of returning profits to shareholders and maximizing those profits, means that we can continue to focus on that mission, both in the current state of the internet and in future states of the internet.
Interesting. It's a terrific mission. So, but I want to chat a little about you. Where'd you grow up, Eric?
I grew up in Oregon, Eugene, Oregon. It was a great place to grow up.
And I noticed you went to school at Princeton.
I did. Yeah, I left the West Coast for the East Coast back in 1987, and found myself in New Jersey, the only other place that didn't allow you to pump your own gas at the time.
Is that true? You can't pump your own gas in Oregon and New Jersey, or at least you couldn't then?
You couldn't then. Oregon changed it. I think New Jersey, you still can't. Yeah,
it's is it a strong union state and they just don't want people taking those jobs away, or that's, yeah.
There must be a powerful lobby.
Yeah, that's just an interesting little quirk of the law. So, and you went to Princeton, and then you went 3 years later, you got your MBA at Stanford. So you studied mathematics at Princeton?
Studied mathematics at Princeton, and I got into the math department as my major in my junior year, and pretty quickly discovered that academia was not a path that would be fulfilling to me. And so beat a hasty retreat to something where I could use that same set of skills, but apply it to something that, in a way felt a lot more like a team sport.
Yeah, it's too bad. I'm sorry that you couldn't get into any good schools. I mean, Princeton and Stanford, they're kind of safety schools. So no, it's a great thing. And, one of the things in your career, you spent a lot of your time at Disney. And I'm not familiar with Disney. What do they do?
Disney, we do some drawings. I think it's a version of flip books that you can actually put on the screen. It's quite fascinating where you put a lot of pictures in sequence and then they seem to move. It's amazing.
It doesn't sound like much of a company, no, but certainly, one of the great companies of our lifetime. And you had a heck of a run there. I'd love to understand, some of the challenges that you worked and some of the great lessons learned that set you up for Mozilla today.
Yeah, I spent the first 8 years of my time at Disney in the corporate strategy department, which was a department that was founded by Michael Eisner when he came into the company back in the 80s. And that was a group that really had three functions. First, to run the strategic plan for the company every year. And so as an academy company and how you do strategic planning, it was a great hotbed for learning that. Secondarily, we were responsible for all of the M&A that the company did. So if there was an M&A transaction, that would be sent to our group. And when I was there, I had the opportunity to work on a number of different M&A projects. And that really was an extension of work that I had done prior to business school when I was at Morgan Stanley as an investment banker. And then third, we provided consulting and a different point of view on the state of the business from the operators in that business. And it was an interesting time to be in that department because the company had recently purchased ABC, Capital Studies ABC, and we were seeing a pretty significant evolution from the state that the company was in when Michael Eisner came into the 80s to the company that it became right prior to Bob Iger assuming the CEO role in 2006-ish, I think. So we were seeing the evolution of the company and the evolution of how management took place and the balance of the dialogue between the operators and strategic planning, if you will. It was a great opportunity to be there for about 8 years working on the strategic plan with the studios and filmed entertainment group. Did a number of things regarding rationalization of the TV portfolio that we brought in when we acquired Capital Cities ABC. I spent a ton of time working on questions about how much investment Disney should be making in the filmed entertainment business based upon risk and return characteristics of the different brands that were in its portfolio. And then spent a lot of time working on intellectual property acquisition, including the acquisition of the Muppets by Disney, which it did finally completed in about 2004 after what had really been a 20-year courting process.
20 years. Why rush these things, right? 20 years? Did I hear that correctly?
About 20 years, yeah. Jim Henson died, and that created some tax issues that put the Muppets in Siberia for a while, and then eventually they came back to their appropriate home.
Yeah, it's what a thing he created, though, right? I mean, the Muppets. So.
I grew up with them, and so I was so happy to work on that transaction. It was really kind of a blast.
Oh yeah, that would be a lot of fun. I mean, I still crack up every once in a while. From the TV show, the two old guys in the audience who would always just be highly critical. Some reason they pop up on YouTube for me once and again. I still find it hysterical. It
kind of sounds like you're talking about us right now.
I don't think we're cranky. We might be old. So. But anyway, it sounds like a great run. And one of the things. I'm sorry.
Well, I just want to say, then I spent the next 8 years at Disney in the consumer products department. When Bob Iger took over, I took the opportunity to change departments. And that was a fascinating opportunity because it moved me from a strategy role to an operational role. I did strategy for about 2 years with Andy Mooney in the consumer products group, and then found myself working with the publishing group on a business plan to take a business for where we licensed our characters and content to creators of English language learning curricula for kids. And we worked on a business plan to flip that script and go into that business vertically. And I found myself working on a startup for Disney in China called Disney English, where we were actually setting up learning centers where kids were taught English as a supplemental after-school activity. And that was really the moment that I moved from being the strategy guy to something more akin to a CFO, if not in name, but actually in function. And that was really a big turning point in my career. So that was exciting opportunity. Disney gives you all kinds of opportunities, and I was able to, really learn a lot and move in different directions there.
Yeah, that sounds absolutely fascinating. And so, did you live in China during this experience, or?
Yeah, I lived in Shanghai from 2008 to 2010.
Okay. Did you learn? I know it's difficult to learn the Chinese language as an adult, but did you learn to speak Chinese, or perhaps you
I
did
learned
before
what
you?
I like to call taxi cab Chinese. I could tell
Okay.
people to turn left, turn right, go straight ahead, or stop.
Okay.
And that was enough to get me home every night.
There you go. So interesting. So cool. Now, working at Disney, and you mentioned a couple of the CEOs, and to me, you know, Disney CEOs are just iconic. I mean, they're in that category, Bill Gates and Jack Welch and some others. I mean, just famous people who shaped the world around us. But did you have any important mentors along the way? I would think that would be a big thing around Disney, right? Of, you know, having
Yeah,
access to
there's
some
a
great
ton you
thinkers.
can learn. I mean, I really had the good fortune sitting where I did in the strategy department, and then moving into a role in consumer products, just to see a number of different leaders. When I was in the corporate strategy department, I worked for Peter Murphy, who is the chief strategy officer of the company, and learned a ton from him. When I was in consumer products, I worked for Andy Mooney, who had long careers at Nike and then Disney, and then I believe he's at Fender now, following one of his passions for electric guitars.
All right.
And then I worked with Bob Chapek a bit, and I ran across a number of leaders. I also had a significant amount of contact with Bob Iger when I was in those roles, and every leader brings something different to the table. And you learn a lot through osmosis, and you get the opportunity to say, what are great things that they do? Attention to detail, attention to communication, attention to making relationships. And you get to say, what do these things work for me as a human being? And what parts of these leadership styles don't work for me, and what are things that I don't want to do that may work for them, but it doesn't work for me because of the way that I'm constituted and the things that I want to do. So in flowing around the company in several different roles and meeting a lot of different executives, I was able to pick up a lot of different things that I was really grateful for.
That's fantastic. So, and I'm curious, you're working for Mozilla today, and two great companies, but very, very different, at least from my perspective. What are some of the critical things you learned at Disney that you still bring with you day to day to Mozilla?
And Disney, in the way that we communicated inside the company, there was an emphasis on being crisp and logical and being able to jump to the conclusion of an argument and then back it up with facts. It's called the pyramid principle. I'm sure that a lot of people who are listening to this podcast have heard of that. And that got drilled into me from a very early age. And that level of precision of communication and thought is something that I find incredibly valuable as a CFO working for Mozilla or anyplace else. Part of that is that people don't have a lot of time. And so it's better to come at them with the answer and then support that with details. But also it really allows you to have an interactive conversation and take the conversation where you need to have it. I view my role as a CFO as being one where I'm advisor, and to some extent I'm a storyteller who happens to have facility with the numbers and the facts. And I use those pieces to build up the story that I want to tell, to try to take people to the conclusion that I think is important. And that storytelling is really the most important part of the job. Being able to have facility with the numbers is the way that you do it. But at the end of the day, if you can't tell the story behind it, then it's just a big pile of numbers.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And in fact, I issue these, infographics, white papers, and one of them was the CFO's role as a storyteller. And for some, it's sort of a comfortable thing, an uncomfortable thing for them to embrace. It's like storytelling sounds like fiction to some people, right? But then they got it. It ended up being like one of my most popular white papers that I've ever issued is just, how do you become a storyteller? If you're just giving data, the only people who are going to pay attention to are your CPAs and other accountants and that sort of stuff. But you got to make the numbers sing a little bit, as they say. So
yeah, I mean, ironically, I think some of that does come from being at Disney, where like the entire purpose of Disney is to tell stories, and everything that it does is tell stories. So if you work that into your DNA, then that's just the angle that you come at things from. And I totally agree with you.
There you go. Yeah, every financial person should spend 6 months at Disney. It's going to be the best place on the planet for storytelling. But I'd love to chat with Mozilla a little bit. And the top of this, you mentioned that you have the foundation and then the for-profit corporation. And I'm curious, what's that like? Because I've just never spoken to anybody in that situation before.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And one place where people can go to learn more about this is to look at the State of Mozilla report, which we published recently on the web. And that gives you a really good snapshot of what we're all about and why we exist. Like I said previously, the mission of the company as a whole is to ensure that we have a free and open internet, and we put people above profits. And what that means for me as the CFO of a subsidiary of this nonprofit that is in fact a for-profit is that I have to balance the perspectives an awful lot. When I came in and started my relationship with our CEO, Mitchell Baker, I had to turn my way of thinking a little bit. And rather than maximizing your EBITDA, which is a phrase that a lot of people here weren't even familiar with, and I've had to drum into people's head as our measure of operating income. The goal is not to maximize that. The goal is to be a sustainable company and be able to meet our mission goals. And then growth is really in the service of increasing the ambit of the mission-based goals that we can drive. But we have to turn a profit. And that's the funny thing. When people think nonprofit, they think, okay, you don't need to turn a profit. And the answer is no. The role of a CFO here is not dissimilar from the role of a CFO in any other organization, where an important part of your job is keeping an eye on the pocketbook and making sure that you have the resources to do what you need to do to get to the next stage. But in this case, we have the luxury of not having to report on a quarterly basis, not having shareholders who are determined to flip the company in some specified period of time and want to maximize your EBITDA so they can do it at the right multiple. Here, it's really about what are we generating? Are we able to do the things that we're doing on an ongoing basis? And does that feed back into the higher mission of the not-for-profit company?
Interesting. That you got to be a fascinating and really challenging environment, to say the least. So,
yeah, it's very, very different. But in a way, it kind of resonates with who I am. It's not about leaving every single dollar on the table. It's about doing something that is really interesting and for the good of humanity, while using business as a tool in order to bring that off.
Well, yeah. Hey, what could be more noble than that? I know Mozilla is committed to, open source, and to me, as somebody who's online quite a bit, what I love is protecting our privacy. And how does this influence you? Some of the strategic decisions you make in your role as CFO of the company?
That's interesting to talk about, because we're constantly thinking about our browser. And our browser, one of the things that we don't do is we don't collect the same amount of data on people that other browsers do. And we make decisions about isolating processes between different tabs that you're in, not using cookies, not gathering information that don't maximize our revenue in every single case. And so we have at times when I've been here, sat here with decisions, and the decision really is how much of a revenue tax are we willing to put on ourselves to provide certain features or take certain actions that we believe are for the good of folks who would use our properties. One thing that we've been doing over the course of the past several years, and a very important initiative at Mozilla, is diversification of our revenue. We have 3 revenue models that come into the company. We have search, which we gain through search partnerships with folks like Google and Bing and DuckDuckGo, Ecosia, Quant, other places. We have display advertising, which is primarily shown on the new tab of our browser. And then we have some subscription revenues for products like Mozilla VPN. In the display advertising side, on our new tab page, we are providing an advertising product to advertisers that doesn't provide the same amount of tracking that a ad on Facebook or someplace else would, because we don't believe in that kind of tracking. We believe that it's a business that can be strong and solid. And we believe that there are advertisers who are going to align at the right price with the product that we're offering there. But there are ways that we could maximize that revenue even more, which we're just not going to, because that's not who we are.
Yeah, it's that your strong point, at least for me, right? I mean, it's why I use it, right? I feel a lot safer using Mozilla than I do any other browser, and I suspect I'm probably not the only one who thinks that way. So
yeah, and at the end of the day, one of the reasons to do that is because the more people that are using Firefox, it means that the protocols that we use to surf the web are protocols that companies that create websites and web services and the like are going to have to support. And that means that those protocols are also in the hands of a nonprofit foundation as opposed to a profit-seeking company, which is in the long run for the good of everybody.
Cool. And I know you have a reputation of engaged and passionate users and contributors. I've even heard your followers compared to fans for football teams and stuff like that. So what are some of the things you do, the initiatives, partnerships to, remain involved with that community? And they feel like, your users almost feel like a sense of ownership of the company, it seems to me. So, how do you, continually strengthen that community?
Yeah, we have some initiatives that are going on, particularly in our innovation area. I'll give a shout out to our Emo Udom, who runs a lot of these programs for us. As an example of places where we're doing that, we are getting more heavily involved in artificial intelligence. Last year, we ran the Open AI Challenge, where we brought together a lot of people from a lot of different walks of the AI community, academics, activists, people who were running small companies doing interesting things in AI, to talk about the future of AI and talk about the future of AI in an open way. We're in a phase right now with artificial intelligence, which is not dissimilar from where we were with web protocol 25 years ago, where it's new, it's interesting. A lot of people are doing fascinating things with it. But there's also the risk that this is something that is not open, something that ends up being owned by large companies. And our entire perspective on AI is very similar to our perspective on the web 25 years ago, where the things that we're focused on are, this has to be open. We have to have things that people can use. There has to be accessibility for small companies, individual users to be able to use AI. And there has to be accountability. Too often people say, we'll let AI run this and AI will come out with an answer. And because the machine has given us the answer is okay. But I think we're seeing all of the places where the seam's showing that right now, where AI has to be auditable, it has to be transparent. You have to understand why it's coming up with the answers that it's coming up with. And those are all things that we stand for inside Mozilla through our innovation. It's places that we're talking about as part of the foundation. And then the foundation has also set up a sister company to Mozilla Corporation called Mozilla AI that is busy working on open source protocols for AI for precisely that end.
Interesting. Well, my next question was going to be about digitalization, digital strategies. And I'm curious, one of the areas that CFOs can really make a huge impact is to a thoughtful digital strategy. So I am curious, that you touched upon a little bit, but what are some of the digitalization strategies that you've adopted, not only for the company, generally speaking, but within its finance function?
Wow. Within the finance function, a lot of our biggest priority has been to build an infrastructure for the companies so we can be as effective as possible in diversifying Mozilla's revenue streams and activities. We have an interesting problem at Mozilla in that when we came out of the gate 25 years ago, the very first thing that we did hit the bullseye and was an enormous success. This is like the resource curse, right? And
Right. Yeah.
once that happens to you, it's not a way to build very good habits as a company. And so what we've been doing over the course of the past couple of years while I've been here has been undergoing a lot of transformation of our infrastructure so that we can more effectively allow this company to engage in new initiatives, invest in the right things at the right times, at the right levels, and then assess the outcomes and then lather, rinse, and repeat as we try to grow. And so there's a digitization part of this strategy, which is changing systems. We moved from our existing ERP to NetSuite, and that allowed us to have better, more fine-grained reporting on what we were doing. We used that to restack our chart of accounts. Then we were putting in a new budgeting system, and we're using that to enable more profit by product reporting inside the company, so that we can actually measure the specific investment that we're putting into new initiatives and then be able to track investments against outcomes. It's not just digital here, though. This is all about enablement. And what we've also had to do is we've had to work with all of our partners to change the culture and operations of the company, because the system is only there to enable the things that you do as an organization. And so we've had to work pretty closely with all of our partners in the marketing department and the product department and the like to put the right systems and organizations in place for us to be able to report on this information. So, I see this as us, going back to that storytelling conversation that we had previously, having better information to be able to tell the story about the different things that we're doing. And I truly believe that this is transformative of the company, because it's going to allow us to make decisions in a more agile fashion with better information. And, in a way, like, when you're innovating, you're going to fail a lot. It's going to allow us to fail quicker. And the quicker you fail, the quicker you become successful.
Yeah, that's there used to be just a Silicon Valley philosophy, but as it turns out, the entire world seems to have adopted that. So, but I want to touch upon earlier, you mentioned the CEO and the relationship between the CFO and the CEO. It's, such a strategic partnership. And in fact, I think there was one study, that said it was the most critical relationship along the C-suite. And I'm curious how the two of you work together, what that dynamic is like, how you support each other in, leading this company.
Mitchell is a fascinating person. Mitchell Baker, she, is obviously really the founder of Mozilla, the spiritual core of Mozilla, both the CEO of the company and the chairperson of the foundation. And I came to Mozilla, largely because I was recruited. And then when I met her, she was such a interesting mind, I guess. And in our relationship, I think we both have aspects where we complement each other really well. And we talk a couple times a week, and then Slack constantly. Part of it is like creating space, and creating space for the minds to work. And me understanding her perspective as the person who really holds the, if you will, the ethos of the company and the spirit of the company, but also knowing that she wants the company to change and diversify, and holding these two things at the same time. What is the core of Mozilla, and where do we want to take Mozilla and evolve it to be as successful and as much of a contributor to the culture of the internet in its second 25 years as it was in the first 25. And then giving space for me to basically sort of share what I understand from the CFO perspective, from having worked at places like Disney, from having worked in the ad tech business. And there's a give and take, and there's always sort of an aha that takes place. And we take the time and the space to be able to examine those things. And really that gives us the opportunity to make really, really good decisions. So it's a relationship that I treasure. Like you said, it's an important relationship, and in some ways, it's a very intimate relationship.
Yeah, that it's interesting that there was a time where nobody necessarily thought that was the most critical relationship, but Accenture was the firm I couldn't think of earlier that did the study. But yeah, it's so critical, and it's not like you have to be hanging out on the weekends and be golfing together or whatever. But it just if you support each other, you challenge each other. It's so critical to leading the company. So it sounds like you've got almost a perfect relationship with the CEO.
I find myself very fortunate. It's one of the things that makes me so happy to be here.
Yeah, fantastic. So I also one thing I was looking at your LinkedIn profile, and you've had a fascinating career. But of all things that jumped out at me and intrigued me, you're on the board chair of the Independent Shakespeare Company, which is a first for my guests. I'd love to hear a little bit about that.
Well, I mean, the secret in my background, yes, I have the math background and everything, but I've always been a bit of a literature, art, and music nerd. And so I like to do things that, kind of please that part of me. Shakespeare is something I was introduced to in college. And when I came out here to LA about 10, 15 years ago, we went to Shakespeare in the Park here in Griffith Park in Los Angeles. For free. And it was an amazing experience. The Independent Shakespeare Company is a company that is devoted to putting a cast on stage that reflects the diversity of Los Angeles. Has it play to people who represent the diversity of Los Angeles? It's just taking place in essentially, more like Central East LA. And so you bring in a wide range of people from different walks of life, about 40% of whom really this is their only exposure to the theater. And they make Shakespeare and all of that incredibly complicated language totally accessible to that audience in all of its, high. And I mean, frankly, like Shakespeare, let's be clear, Shakespeare was pretty dirty too.
Yeah, I don't know that I appreciated that as a kid, but yes.
but both of those things are put on stage there, and so it's a community resource for LA. It's a gem of the LA experience, and at the time that I got interested in the company, it was also the time for me to start giving something back to the community. And I met some people who worked on the board, and they said, "Do you want to join the board?" And I said, "Sure." And I've been involved with them for a long time, and I treasure it. We also dollar for dollar, as a CFO speaking, like if you compare this to New York Shakespeare Festival, San Francisco Shakespeare Festival, we are more efficient on a metrics basis, dollar for dollar, of translating money into audience members than any of these other Shakespeare festivals. And I'm very pleased about that. We could use some more money, of course.
Yeah, sure. Well, I never heard anyone describe Shakespeare in terms of its efficiency and financial models, but
the return on investment is strong for the Independent Shakespeare Company of LA.
You are an interesting man, Eric. I bet you're the only mathematician with an MBA who's on the board of this company. Am I right?
It's not a very big board, and that's probably true.
Yeah. So I feel pretty safe with that. So you have a lot going on. You're working with this great company, wonderful business, and you're on the board. And, one of the big challenges my members face is the whole work-life balance thing. And what's your philosophy on that? You seem like you're pulling it off very effectively.
What's my philosophy? I guess my philosophy is you need to have balance. We work a lot, but you need to find ways to please the other parts of your brain. It's very stressful, sort of focusing on the budget, focusing on, how do we meet the board's expectations for what we do? How do we work as a team inside Mozilla to meet our shared objectives? And so for me, I like to take the time to just do projects of my own that, and frankly, for me, one of the things that really pleases me is making things. I've always kind of enjoyed making things. There's that sort of hidden artist type. I'm not terribly artistic, but if I can sort of put something together and sort of look at it and say, yeah, this is something that pleases me, then I end up pretty happy.
Yeah. When you say build thing, you mean like with your hands?
Well, I mean, the thing that has been my passion, really ever since the pandemic started, I had threatened to get into home brewing for a number of years. And then when the pandemic came and I found myself at home with a lot of spare time on my hands, I finally said, okay, I really need to have a pretty time-consuming hobby. And home brewing is that. So for the past 4 years or so, I've been making my own beer, and I get a tremendous amount of joy out of that, because it's not just making the beer itself. It's turned into this entire art project for me, where when I create a beer, it's like, okay, what is the beer called? What is its name? Which is usually some kind of reference to something in my life that's very obscure. And then it has to have a graphic associated with it. And that, I'm not an artist myself, but you can go to Fiverr and you can give an artist a spec on how to create a piece of art that is affiliated with that beer. And then there's places to write text on the label. And so I write a little bit of text that amuses me, and maybe is sort of like, if you will, sort of a 50 to 60 word poem. And then, of course, the beer has to have a theme song. So you have to sort of figure out what song from your vast music library it sits in opposition to that beer in an interesting way. And then you have an entire art project, which you can like give to somebody, you can drink, you can talk about it. I also like put it up on the web and have a homepage for all my home brewing exercises to tell stories about it. So it turns into a whole thing for me.
That's fantastic. And I notice you do list it on your LinkedIn profile. So
yeah, kind of as a goof.
No, I think it's terrific that you can include something like that on your. But is this something? Do you do it for joy, or do you actually like market the beer that you produce?
I do it for joy. I actually have brewed some beers for the Shakespeare Company in conjunction with their galas to riff on ideas that they have, as well as allow them to auction them off. And I have also discovered that people kind of like it when you give them free beer, because I can't drink all of it myself. I got to give it away.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Well, I'm from Boston, so as you might imagine, that the concept of free beer is a pretty cool thing. So, growing up in the 1970s and 80s in Boston, everybody I knew was a beer drinker. So, and I've learned that that's kind of well known. Like when when I travel and I meet people from out of the city, and they say, what drink do you order with your meal? And I'll order like a beer. People will ask, are you from Boston? And it's like, I didn't know that was one of our stereotypes. But
Oregon too.
Oregon
Oregon's actually the place where the guy who was able to convince the federal government to make home brewing legal, I think was an Oregonian. So on Oregon.
Nice. That's great to know. Well, my next question was actually going to be a fun fact, but I suspect you're going to have trouble topping that one. So, one thing I would like to ask is, what's your take on some advice you can give to the next generation of CFOs, that would sort of help them achieve some of the successes that you've achieved in your career?
My advice is that it's incredibly important to focus on the teamwork aspect of what you do. There's some reputation that I saw in finance departments when I started my career, where finance departments were to some extent the enforcers. And to a very large extent, because we sit on a lot of information that other people don't have access to or don't have the capability to understand. Sometimes finance departments were known for using that as a weapon or a source of advantage. And that's been something that I decided early on in my career. That's not something that I wanted to do. That my own ethos was very much about transparency and storytelling, and having the conviction of my own perspective on the information, and having the conviction to be able to tell that story, to share that with the team, to explain with them why I have my point of view, and also fully acknowledge that it is a point of view that comes from my own place, and that other people might have different points of view. And, there's a tremendous amount of ambiguity in the CFO job as well. None of us really know what's going to happen in the future. We can use past data to forecast what we're doing in the future, but that's not always the right direction to go. Companies run with both money, but they also run with people. And so as the CFO, you are a contributor to the team. You have great value to the team in doing that. And do that honestly, do that forthrightly, use your superpowers for good as a member of the team. But hold it lightly too, because it is a team sport.
I think that's some great advice. And you mentioned, you can't predict the future from the past. I had a boss, he had the expression of driving while looking in the rearview mirror, right? It's not how you forge the future by looking at what happened in the past. Learn the lessons from it and see some trends.
That's right. Those trends are important, but
yeah, you can influence the future. You cannot influence the past. So, but Eric, this has been a great conversation. I know you're a busy guy, so I certainly appreciate your time. And I want to give you the final word. If there's anything you'd like to share with my listeners.
I think we covered a lot of ground. What I guess the final word would be, everyone, please, go onto the internet and go to mozilla.com, download the Firefox browser and use that browser, because but the browser is going to be better for you, and you're also fighting for a free and open internet by using our browser. So,
well, that's great. Thanks, Eric.
Thank you, Jack. Great to talk to you.
Thank you for listening to this episode. To continue your exploration of this role that focuses on strategy, leadership, finance, and technology, listen to more episodes of the show at rockstarcfos.com. Join this revolution, episode by episode. Push yourself to achieve great things and unlock the best opportunities available to you. CFOs are creating a legacy, and it's time for you to leave your own unique imprint on the world today. That's all for now. See you on the next one.